Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. My name is Ahmed Moor. I'm a fellow at the Foundation. Today's September 21st, 2025, and I'm delighted as always to be here with Peter Beinart, who really needs no introduction for this podcast. Peter, I'm grateful to you for your time on a busy weekend before the start of the new year. So Happy New Year to
Thank
you
you.
and to everybody else who celebrates.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
Peter, we're going to start with Palestinian statehood. So today, the UK, Portugal, Canada, and Australia, the Commonwealth countries, recognized Palestine. France is imminently planning to do so. I have my own ideas here, but what are the arguments for Palestinian statehood, I guess, to start? And then what does it mean practically in the context of an ongoing genocide and a turbulent, I guess, international landscape?
Yeah, I'm curious what you think. I mean, there's something just bizarre about it, right? In the sense that we've never been further away from a Palestinian state actually existing, right? So the obvious things that need to be done now, right, are to stop supplying weapons, to impose sanctions, to allow international justice to go forward, and to try to stop the genocide, right? I mean, this is a very, on its face, it's a very strange response to these things because it doesn't actually stop any of those things. And it in some ways moves us into a kind of parallel and I would say somewhat fantastical reality, right? In which the question on the table is the imminence of a Palestinian state, where that's not really what's on the table at all. Now, I guess you may have thought about this more than me. I suppose the most positive spin on this would be that this is a step towards other things, that once you recognize that Israel is committing this genocide on the territory of what you have recognized the Palestinian state, then it requires you to start doing a bunch of things to impose sanctions on Israel. But of course, it seems to me you could have done that without recognizing the Palestinian. Like you don't need to go through that step in order to get to the things that actually really matter, right? And time is of the essence, you know. But to me, it really all depends on what happens after the recognition of the state. What I don't know. How do you see it?
I actually agree with you. I mean, the argument I think which is made popularly is that you recognize a Palestinian state and allow the Palestinians to avail themselves of mechanisms that may cause the Israelis to stop everything they're doing. And that's the apartheid, the encroachment of the settlements. The encroachment is the wrong word. The accelerated development of settlements in the West Bank and Jerusalem, and then of course the genocide in Gaza. But like international law already exists. Give support to the ICC, ICJ. You have mechanisms
Yes,
in
yes,
place
yes.
that should be available if you really, to address the need, if you really
Right,
wanted to address the need on
right,
the ground.
right,
And so,
right.
Daniel Levy is in the New York Times today. He spoke with a reporter, and his comment is this seems like an evasion. This seems like, at least in the UK context, an effort by Labour to avoid or to let off, release some of the pressure that's building
Yes,
within the party.
yes.
And so then in the FT's reporting, there's a Labour MP, Dr. Simon Ofer, who Israel prevented from visiting the West Bank this past week. And his quote ends there, the story, and it's when a country is committing genocide, we do not want to help them. And that's a Labour MP in the current government. And so I don't know if it's realistic or cynical, but I tend to view things in the way that Daniel Levy does, and the way that you just described, that probably this is just a way to relieve pressure.
Yes.
If you wanted to sanction the Israelis, those tools are already available.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and it seems to me also very hard to imagine it will relieve pressure. I mean, because people aren't stupid. I mean, people are reacting to what they're seeing Israel doing. So, and they know it's being done with the support, the diplomatic and military and economic support of these countries. So, as they continue to see this happening, they will continue to be outraged and continue to be politically dissatisfied and protesting. So, you're not actually going to satiate them with this, you know?
I agree. So, but then there's a related phenomenon, which is that the Israeli government is reacting as though this is a meaningful
Yeah.
step.
Yeah.
They're acting angrily and
Right.
vociferously raising their voices
Right.
against it. So what
Right.
does that imply? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it seems that I worry that it could in some ways be the worst of all worlds. I mean, in the sense that like I think that the Israeli government benefits from kind of shadow boxing with, with Western countries, in which Western countries appear to do something, allow the Israeli government to basically suggest that, we're the victims of an anti-Semitic world, but not pay any actual consequence. I think that's something Benjamin Netanyahu has generally benefited from politically, right? I think that if there actually are consequences, material consequences, economic, cultural consequences, then I think the political dynamic in Israel is potentially different. But I actually think Israel might be responding this way because it's politically advantageous to Israel to do this, because they can say we're being victimized without actually paying a price.
Yeah, that's an important insight. Thank you. All right. So next, I want to transition to what's happening in the right. When I didn't really pay attention to internet culture before the start
Mm.
of the genocide. I didn't
Lucky you. Yeah.
I didn't think it really mattered. I thought it
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah.
this virtual
Yeah.
world and everything that
Yeah.
happened was more or less virtual, and it was
Yeah.
incels and lots of
Yeah.
young guys
Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
Halo online.
Yeah.
And then I read Doppelganger, and this was true for the first Trump
Yeah.
presidency as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I didn't care about
Yeah.
Steve Bannon. I didn't know who he was
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And then I read Doppelganger and realized, oh, wait a second, there must be a lot happening there. And of
Yeah.
course, the reality is that our director of the FBI today and his deputy are people who built reputations in a very online
Yes.
environment.
Yes.
Um, and it seems like a lot of policy is actually being developed in in Twitter or YouTube and in these,
Right.
again, the blogosphere on the right. And so I've been paying a lot of attention to it,
Yeah.
really since I read Naomi Klein's book.
Yeah.
And it seems that there's this big internecine fight. Um, Benjamin Netanyahu was invited onto
Right.
Newsmax after Charlie Kirk's
Right.
murder and was asked the question, "Did you have anything to do with this?"
Right. Right.
And then he comes out with a 2 minute
Crazy.
video
Yeah.
saying, "We had nothing to do with
I
Charlie
know.
Kirk's
It's
murder."
insane. It's insane.
So yeah, how do you explain any of that? What's going on?
Well, I mean, I think the first point is that this right-wing ecosystem is incredibly conspiracy oriented, right? So it generates the most fantastical conspiracy theories, right? QAnon, Pizzagate, I mean, all of this stuff. So Israel is now being put into this soup of conspiracy theory creation, which in some ways is not surprising at all, right? Because Israel actually is powerful, and also because Jews and Jewish things naturally tend to generate conspiracy theorizing as well. And I think that what is fascinating to see on the right is that the right it's nativist, it's conspiratorial, and it tends to draw very harsh and civilizational divides, right? So it's not human rights oriented, really, right? But the nativism leads it to be people to be suspicious of Israel because it's just a foreign country, right? And so I watched this interview that with Charlie Kirk did with these young people, these chapter leaders in Turning Points USA, and it's very interesting because they don't mention the Palestinians at all. They have no sympathy for the Palestinians, but they don't like America giving money to Israel. Because it's a foreign country. And B, they don't like the idea that a foreign country is messing around in American politics. Now, they didn't mind that with Russia because that was associated with the Democrats. But because APAC is kind of bipartisan, they don't like APAC because they feel like APAC is a foreign, working for a foreign country. So this nativism is now, I think, being applied to Israel. And then I think the fascinating divide becomes how this civilizational thing plays out. Because the dominant view on the right for decades has been the civilizational divide is between Judeo-Christian America and Israel on one side and the Muslims, right? But what you find when you listen to Candace Owen and Tucker Carlson people is they're drawing the civilizational line differently, right? It's Christians versus everybody else, which is why they focus on abuses of Palestinian Christians, but often in a quite problematic way, right? As if look at what the Jews are doing to the Christians, right? As if but it's a redrawing of the division of the civilizational divide in a way that still allows them to be anti-Muslim in a way, but but breaks apart the Judeo-Christian thing, which has been so central, I think, to right-wing support for Israel.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, but with the whole Netanyahu, I mean, you get the sense that he was caught flat-footed.
Yes,
He stepped into the
yes,
Charlie Kirk
yes,
discussion,
yes,
claimed that it was some Muslim
yes,
craziness,
yes.
and then by trying to exploit that, I mean, I watched a clip of J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, having a conversation with Tucker Carlson, where Tucker Carlson condemns Netanyahu for seeking to claim Charlie Kirk's legacy. And
Mm,
then, of course, you have the 2-minute video where Netanyahu's saying, no, 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 we had nothing to do with the assassination. And so,
right.
so does that feel to you like the Israelis are aware of kind of the universe that they're now operating within, or that they've just kind of stepped in it?
I mean, I think my guess would be the Israelis are struggling to come to understand this, just like a lot of us are, because again, it's moving fast, and there's also a big divide between where Republicans in Congress are, right? Not many Republicans in Congress, except maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene, are talking this way. So when the Republican, presumably the Israeli government goes to talk to their Republican friends in Congress, and they think things are fine, right? These people are all still supporting military aid. They're all telling Israel to do whatever it wants to the Palestinians. But then this thing is bubbling here under the surface, right? In ways that I think are, and I think that the claim that Israel was responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk is lunatic and insane, right? It is though probably the case that Charlie Kirk was evolving in his view on Israel, not in a way that I think he was going to become a critic of Israel on human rights grounds, because he's not human rights oriented and he's extremely Islamophobic. But because he, like other people, has to kind of move in response to his base, I think he was probably moving. In fact, he said, I don't think we should be giving military aid to Israel. And he was starting to sound a little more suspicious of AIPAC. So I think he was moving in this direction. Of course, that didn't mean that Israel killed him. It's ridiculous, right? But I think that he was, this shined a light on his evolution, which I think is tracking the evolution of other people who are very connected to the online right-wing space.
So I started this question by saying I didn't pay attention to the
Yeah.
online world, only began to when I realized that, particularly through the Trump presidency, this is where policy is happening.
Yeah, yeah,
So how does that groundswell of conspiracism,
yeah,
conspiratorial thinking, the stuff which is bubbling up and percolating,
yeah,
how does that develop into policy? And what is the near-term impact? Again, these guys are
yeah.
listening to Tucker Carlson. JD Vance is having a conversation with him. How does that percolate into policy?
I mean, it's a really good question. I don't know. It seems to me in both parties you have a kind of top versus bottom split, right, on the politics, in which the elites of both parties and the political establishment of both parties are much more pro-Israel than the bases. And there's a struggle between top and bottom, just like you're seeing the Democratic Party over Zoran Mamdani. I think that I don't think I mean, if I had to guess, I would guess that over time, more Republicans will move towards a position which questions military aid to Israel and maybe has a more skeptical view of AIPAC, which is not necessarily to say that they're not still willing to support genocide and ethnic cleansing, right? Um, it is interesting to think back about Trump's attack on Iran, which did upset a lot of people in the MAGA base, but Trump did it anyway because he thought it would be good politics for him, and there were people around him who were encouraging him to do it, and he got away with it, right? Because it didn't seem to produce a long drawn out war. I mean, we'll see what happens. So I don't think we should suggest, I mean, I still think there are powerful pro-Israel forces that have Trump's ear, right? But I would guess that over time that this shift will start to play itself out in Republican policymaking.
Yeah, and I wonder to what extent there's a leading indicator component to this. Again, I may be overstating the degree to which policy is being made by a tweet-heavy presidency,
Yeah, yeah,
by right-wing media that occurs
yeah,
on Twitter. Um, but then let's transition, I guess, to the Democrats, because
yeah,
they're also beginning to see
yeah,
have been seeing meaningful pressure from
yeah,
the base, but now we're going into the midterms. And I'll
yeah,
preface this by I got a call from somebody I know through grad school who's running for national office, and looks great in lots of ways, but hasn't taken a meaningful position on the genocide.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm never going to support somebody
Yeah.
who can't come out and condemn genocide in clear, unequivocal
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
And then his response to me was, well, why do you think all these other people in Congress haven't taken that position yet? And it illustrated a lot. Soon after we had that conversation, Bernie Sanders came out and used the word
Yeah.
genocide, and
Yeah.
he was, I think, attacked by people on the left. And I
Yeah.
think it's too little, too late, personally.
Yeah.
But you're more forgiving. I think you have a more um, generous view of people than I do sometimes. So what do you think of Bernie Sanders'
I
statement?
mean,
And then what does that mean for 2026?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm more generous because because unlike you, I didn't grow up in Gaza. I mean, I'm not sure that I would not say it doesn't, I don't know. I don't even know what it means, I guess, to say generous. I think the vast, vast majority of I think most politicians respond to political incentives, There are a smaller number of politicians who are genuinely motivated by conviction. Um, but I think that ultimately, I think what really matters is how politicians see the political landscape. I think George McGovern was genuinely motivated by an opposition to Vietnam, but I think Eugene McCarthy and Robert Kennedy, who ran, in '68 against the war, had been hawks, but they saw things moving, and then politicians rationalize what they need to rationalize. So I think that to me, the kind of question is like, can can more and more Democrats come to the understanding that that it is smart politics for them to basically speak about what Israel's doing honestly and to be in support of human rights and international law, and American law when it comes to the Leahy law. And my sense is that things are moving in that direction. I just don't. I think in the midterms, it's and you can see some of the candidates in the midterms. Like the Senate candidates in Maine, the Senate candidates in Michigan, who are really taking that position. And it's really encouraging. I think my fear is that what those candidates may run up against, which is in a way what Mamdani is running up against, is when you take those positions, then you all of a sudden find yourself in opposition not only to the Republican Party, but to parts of the Democratic Party's donor class. Now, in New York, that's probably not enough to defeat Mamdani, given that it's an overwhelming Democratic city and he has really, really weak opponents. But I worry that in purple states, that even though this position is the right position to take among Democrats, that once you stack if it pushes the donor class to ally with Republicans, that can make it a hard lift for Democrats in the general election. I hope that's not right, because I actually do think that there are a lot of Republicans who are also sympathetic to this view. Again, especially when you frame it in terms of American interest. I mean, I think if you say as a Democratic presidential candidate or Senate candidate, listen, the Israelis have good health care, right? We don't. Why are we giving them money? Right? Even if you don't mention now the human rights part would be very important for Democrats. But even that, even if you don't, the rest of it, I think, must seem to me to poll at 90% among people of all parties, right? Regardless of whether they care about human rights. So I think but I still do worry that uh, I hope that this will be politically successful in general elections, in the midterms, and in the presidential election. I do worry, though, about the force of a donor class which gets mobilized against Democrats and allies with Republicans.
Well, so okay. Can you unpack that? Who is this donor class? Why are they committed to a policy point of view which is so fundamentally at odds with people like you, me, and the rest of kind of the voting base?
Well, look, I mean, it's because, I
Well,
mean,
I mean, let me just say,
yeah.
is it more than APAC?
Yes, I mean, we use APAC in some ways, I think, as kind of a stand-in for a broader. Not all the people who give money to the Democratic Party because they want the Democratic Party to remain quote unquote pro-Israel do it through APAC. I mean, although many do. I think that we're in a we're in a moment in time where, for historical sociological reasons, a lot of big donors to the Democratic Party are American Jews who are middle-aged and older, and many of those people are have a politics in which they are somewhat culturally liberal, right? They're pro-choice and whatever, but they're pro, but they fear the left for a variety of reasons. Probably just they're very rich people. Most rich people are inclined to fear and think the left is not going to be great for them. And their Jewish identity is connected around supporting Israel. Now, I think that, and so they, when they see the left, meaning that it's got an economic agenda that makes them uncomfortable, and it's it's wants to fundamentally change America's relationship with Israel. Their response to that is fear and opposition, right? Now, I don't think that this will necessarily always be the case. I think it may be that their children have a different view, that the constellation of Democratic donors looks different in the years to come. You know that there's this huge generational divide among American Jews. Jews are disproportionately unusually politically articulate population for, again, particular reasons, and they're especially in the Democratic Party, right? I think even more than in the Republican Party, which I think has a different group of rich people they tend to appeal to more, although there's some obviously Jews there too, pro-Israel Jews there too. And so I think it does create a real problem. Now, maybe you can beat those people by catching fire, raising huge amounts of money from small donors, and doing kind of what like Howard Dean or Bernie Sanders or even Barack Obama did in a way in their races. But I do think it seems to me a little harder in Senate and congressional races where you don't have the same kind of national visibility.
Mhm. And that makes a lot of sense as well. I mean, that the explanation you give is kind of a clear sociological one.
Mhm.
And it also, this is what's so tricky about all these
Yeah,
conversations,
yeah,
because you explain things in a matter-of-fact way, and you can see
sure.
where the conspiratorially inclined may step in
Right.
and begin to spin things in a different way.
Yes, and that's why I think it's so important whenever we talk about these things, AIPAC, pro-Israel groups, Jewish groups, to to make it clear that we're not talking about, we're not talking about Jews in general, right? We're not even talking about we're talking about specific groups of people who have particular ideological inclinations, again, which explain how they operate, right? And again, they're not, but I do think that the oftentimes what happens is that folks live within certain communities of people and they reinforce each other, right? And so that people of a certain generational and class, orientation tend to be, I did this interview with Larry Summers a few weeks ago, this conversation with Larry Summers, and he said something to me that I thought was very revealing. So Summers had given a speech years ago where he basically said that anti-Zionism was anti-Semitic in effect. And he told me that he had been surprised by how many people thanked him for saying that, you know? And what I was thinking was that, yes, there are a lot of people but those are the people that Larry Summers is more likely to know, right?
Mhm.
I mean, generationally and in the worlds that he's involved, as opposed to the many, many, many other people, including many Jews, who think that's completely wrong. And I think you see these are communities that tend to reinforce their ideological perspectives and which wield a lot of influence in the Democratic Party. Again, even though their perspectives are not necessarily in line with majority of Jews in the United States.
Right. Thanks, Peter, for your time. Do you have any parting thoughts? Because I do want to let you get back to your Sunday afternoon or Sunday.
Yes, there is football coming up later on. No, I think it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really hope, Ahmed, that we will at some point have some more positive things to talk about.
I agree. Besides the Eagles.
Yeah, that's not positive for me, but I can understand why it's positive for you. Yeah.
Thanks as always, Peter. And again, Happy New Year and
Thank you.
have a restful weekend.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.